And my illustrious co-chair is back there. Her name is Lakeisha Brown. Our president is Tapia Gaddy. Where is Tapia? There she is waving. And we have some of my other officers here, and especially our social action committee. I want to say welcome and thank you especially to our forum partners. We have Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, the Gamma Gamma Lambda chapter. We have Jack and Jill of America Incorporated, the Greenville chapter. The National Council of Negro Women, the Greenville County section. Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, we have the Mu Pi chapter and the Phi Alpha chapter. And Sigma Gamma Rho Sorority Incorporated, Eta Sigma Sigma Alumni chapter. Let's give our partners a hand. We are happy to have our candidates for the South Carolina House of Representatives here with us. We have invited, as you all see, we invited districts 21, 22, 24, and 25. The purpose of this forum is designed to educate voters on the positions, priorities, leadership styles of our candidates seeking election to the South Carolina House of Representatives. Our forum rules are going to be short and simple. You're going to have 2 minutes, and since it's not a lot of you, we might fudge a little bit on that, to introduce yourselves to us, and then you're going to have 2 moderators who will ask you a series of questions, and since we don't have a full house, I guess we can go a little longer than 2 minutes. We're going to say this, but we know y'all already know. We want you to be neutral. We want to enforce our time limits. We don't want you to show out and attack each other. We want to be respectful, and that's who we know that who you are. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome our moderators for this afternoon, Ariana Meadows and Dr. Jasmine Smith.
Hi everyone, like she said, my name is Ariana Meadows, so happy that you guys are here.
And I'm Jasmine Snell. It's a pleasure to moderate this event for you.
We're going to first let the candidates introduce themselves, starting with you, sir.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Wendell Jones. I am the current representative of District 25. It's good to be here with you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having us here today. I'm Caroline Attinger, and I am running for District 24 for the State House of Representatives.
Hi, I appreciate the invite to be here and speak with y'all. My name is Josh Kendrick. I'm running for District 22 House of Representatives.
Thank you. We will now get started with opening questions. First question, what motivated you to run for the South Carolina House of Representatives? And why are you the best candidate to represent this district?
And before you all answer, our timekeepers are in the front, so you'll see a 1 minute. So once you see that, make sure you start wrapping up. And I think we're going to stretch the time to 5 minutes.
Yeah, that's good.
So that way you don't feel rushed when responding. Are there any candidates that would like to start off first? They said ladies first.
So actually running for office was not on my bingo card for 2026. It's something I've always considered, and it really kind of fell into my line of vision back in February. I was approached about running, and really my daughter is the one who sort of threw me under the bus on this. She's like, call my mom, she'll do it, she'll win. So that's what opened the door. But the reason I've always considered it, and the reason that I wanted to run, in part was because of my daughters. I see the things that are happening at the State House, legislation that is getting passed, that is affecting them and their futures here in South Carolina. And I want them living in South Carolina. I want them living next door to me, but that probably won't happen. but I don't want them to leave this state because of some of the legislation that has been passed. So that was one of my reasons for running. The other is that over the years, as we've faced these elections for the State House, my husband and several friends have actually written me in for this seat because they knew my frustration with the incumbent and the fact that things were not being responded to. And I've talked to a number of people around the district who have said, I send emails, I get a form letter back, and then I get no follow-up. Or I make phone calls, and they take my name, but they don't take any contact information because clearly there's not going to be any follow-up. And at this level, when you are living and working in the district that you are serving, you need to get out there and talk to the people who live in the district that you're serving. They are why you are in the State House. You are there to serve them, and you need to be talking to, but more importantly, listening to them. And that is really and truly, those are my reasons for stepping up to do this, because I was frustrated. I was waiting for someone else to step up and realize that I guess that's me. And so I did. And I'm really excited about the process. In fact, one of the things that I've loved about it from the get-go is getting out and meeting people. And the number of people who come up to me at the grocery store who have stopped me to say, I hear you're running, and then they proceed to tell me something that's important to them, and I want to hear that. So that is really my reasoning, but it's also what I hope to do as I serve the people of District 24 and Greenville and South Carolina. Thank you.
So like I said, I'm Josh Kendrick, and I'm running for District 22, which is kind of downtown out into the suburbs. I have probably a similar story about why I'm running. Generally, been very frustrated over the last few years about what I see as the difference between politics and government. We've gotten to a place where the labels we give each other have started to overpower any sense of leadership. So we see decisions being made in Columbia, especially, but other places, but we'll talk about Columbia this afternoon, that don't really benefit the people of South Carolina or the people of these local districts. They benefit re-election, they benefit fundraising, they benefit this divisiveness that we have been sold. They're monetizing these arguments we all have. And it frustrates me because I don't feel like I have a voice in government. I don't feel like I have a person to talk to, and I don't feel like my neighbors or the people that live in the city and the county that I live in have that. More specifically, my wife probably listened to me complain about that for long enough that she said, why don't you go run for office? So it sounds like Caroline is too, but I'm in the unique position of having a spouse who very much supports what I'm trying to do here. She owns a small business in town called Good To Go that she started in my basement. And I say our basement. And, had about 2 customers. Now she has 2 stores, 50 employees. And I have watched her struggle through owning a small business and trying to build it in a climate where there's not a lot of support for that. She doesn't pay anybody minimum wage. She pays far beyond that. She is building people into lives that make this place better. I also have 3 daughters. One of them is grown and she has just started her career. So she was complaining to me the other day about having to fill her car up with gas, which I said it was probably an invitation to have me send her some money. But I also have 2 really little girls who are in elementary school. And I wonder about the place we're leaving for these folks, for these children, for my daughters, for my wife's business. Are we fostering the kind of environment where they're all going to have an opportunity to do better, which means we're all going to have an opportunity to do better. And if we get hung up in politics, and we get hung up in these labels, and we spend our time doing what I call performative politics, where we're playing to the loudest 10%, we're playing to the yelling on social media, and we're not actually doing anything for the citizens, we're not going to be able to leave anybody with that environment. So that's kind of why I do this.
So why did I get into politics? I've been in love with us for a very long time. I really really have. I've been in love with my community for a long time, since I was a kid. And I've always wanted to do something to benefit, and so I have shaped my entire life around serving us, whether it be from being a pastor, even my entrepreneurial pursuits, and now this. But I'll be honest with you, when it comes to politics, I avoided politics like the plague. I did. Folks have been trying to get me to run since I was in my early 30s, and I'm 55 now. And so I begin to realize that if I was going to actually do something that benefit my community, and communities like mine, I couldn't keep avoiding this, because policy shows up at everybody's doorstep. As we're starting to witness even now, every time we begin to make progress, it just takes the stroke of a pen to turn all of that around. And there needed to be somebody at the table who can argue intelligently. There needed to be somebody at the table who would represent well the people that sent them down there. There needed to be somebody at the table who came up with some creative ideas that truly benefited the people that are in my community. And that wasn't at the table. Those folks weren't there. And too often we're being asked to contribute to the pot. We're all paying taxes, but we weren't getting our portion of it back. And so I couldn't keep hoping that somebody else would come up with solutions and me to continue armchair quarterbacking and saying what I would do. Because even my kids got tired of hearing that too. And so I finally raised my hand after talking to a couple people 4 years ago and decided that there's a lot of work that could be done in Columbia if we had some people who looked like me, sounded like me, came from my background as well. And so as I've been there, people constantly ask me this. I said, do you enjoy being at the State House? I'm gonna tell y'all the truth. Here's my answer. My answer is no. See, there's not a lot of joy down there. I said, but there's a lot of purpose down there. I said, the environment that it is right now is not very joyful. It's not joyful to be in a super minority. It's not joyful to have great ideas that go unattended to. But you can also see why God has you there, and how God has your voice there. And so I know that in this phase of my life, in this time of my life, I'm right where I'm supposed to be.
We're going to pause for a moment and then allow Mr. Derek Quarles to introduce himself.
Good afternoon, and excuse my tardiness. I was at a mentoring event. I had to go home and change clothes so that would be appropriate for this. But I'm Derek Quarles. I am from Greenville. I went to Southside High School, went to Hughes and Tanglewood middle schools, and I real quickly. All right. So when I was a young kid, I saw a lot of the issues happening in our schools because I was one of the issues in our schools, right? I was one of the kids that always got in trouble. One of the kids that always got suspended from school. Maybe straight A's, though. It never wasn't because of academics. It was because I was curious about life, curious about what would happen if I did X, Y, and Z. And so I would push the limits and push the envelope. And I'm still that way today. I still push the envelope, right? Because I'm curious about like what will happen if we don't open our mouths, if we don't speak up, if we don't advocate, if we don't say or challenge, what we're hearing and seeing, right? And so I've always been this way my entire life. And I didn't know it was going to lead me into politics as an adult. Background in education, I worked at 3 colleges. I worked at Claflin University, I worked at Hampton University. Briefly, I was challenged, and I also worked at Wiley University of Texas for about 3 years. And I moved back home during COVID for obvious reasons. And I got right back in, I moved to Columbia first and moved back to Greenville. And when I moved away to Texas, I left Greenville, figured I would get away from activism and advocacy work. And in Texas, I was doing the same exact thing, right? I was advocating for our students, I was advocating for our communities, I was working with the mayor, he was also my attorney brother there, and just doing a lot of things that needed to be done to make sure that people in that community felt heard. And so when I came back home, I saw that there were still things in this community that were lacking, and so I wanted to get involved at a high level. And I worked in the Senate when I was at Claflin. I worked in the Senate for 3 years as a page, and I got to see like what it's like working for a senator, working in the Senate. Even worked for the House of Representatives for the Black Caucus for 2.5 years. And so I was able to work on both sides of the aisle and see how things are done from that standpoint. And more recently, I worked for an organization called State Voices in D.C. And at State Voices, I traveled to 28 states. And while traveling in 28 states, I saw all of the things that were happening in other communities that were similar to Greenville. And I'll get on the plane and come back home, and I would dread coming back home because I'm coming back to like all of these issues, right? And I remember I had a conversation with a friend of mine who's a state representative in Pennsylvania, and he said, "Bro, you need to run again. Like the people need to know that you're serious about like supporting them and their needs and their concerns." And so I wasn't really sure about running again, so I started having conversations with people in the community. And I got a phone call from Representative Leola Robinson, and we talked extensively, and she gave me her support. And so at that point, I was like, all right, well, let's rev the engine. And I'm running not so much because somebody supports me, I'm running because I talk to people in this community every single day. I talk to 2 single moms today and yesterday who are struggling, right? We talk about affordable housing, I know we'll get to that somewhere, but what is affordable housing if you can't afford to live in the house, right? And so I'm running to make sure that when we say things, that we actually go and do it, right? And so I'm excited to be running again. I ran for county council 2 years ago, and people have been asking me about that. And I lost about 24 votes. And that means that people want to see something new and something fresh in this community. And so I'm running again because I just want to make sure that our voices are heard and that we are seen and that we have advocacy, true advocacy happening in Columbia from Greenville. I'm running for SC House at 25. Sorry.
Moving on to our next question. What do you believe is the single most pressing issue facing residents in your district, and what specific steps would you take to address it?
Any candidate would like to go first?
I just kind of briefly touched on it a minute ago. It's housing. Housing is a huge issue in our community. And not just affording a house, but also maintaining that house. I can tell you that in the last 4 years, I have single-handedly helped 6 senior citizens in this community, ages 80 to 95, to help them to repair their homes. May Francis Golden was the latest one, her and her husband, Albert Golden. They live in Kennedy Park. And I work with Rebuild Upstate to help them to renovate both their bathrooms in their homes, new railings outside because they are in their 90s and they can't, their mobility is not like what it used to be. And so they put new railings in their homes, they put new showers, walk-in showers in both their bathrooms, new toilets, new vanities. And I myself paid for a new flooring in their whole house because Rebuild Upstate wasn't going to pay for the flooring. And that's just one family that I helped in this community. Right? I'm currently helping Maxie Burton and his wife, Alice Burton, with some stuff in their home. And so and they own their homes outright, but they don't have the means to uplift their homes or to upkeep their homes, right? And that's the same thing for so many people I've talked to in this community, is that, yeah, we got a house and yeah, we own the house, but we can't maintain it, right? And I know that there are some cities and some states that offer funding to help seniors to offset some of those costs. I'm not seeing that here in Greenville. In fact, the county helped a lady a few years ago that I was helping, and then they put a lien on her property after they helped her. $7,000 lien, and then tried to take her home from her. And so these are the realities of the things that are happening in our community. And again, go back to affordable housing. If you can't afford to live in the house, then is it truly affordable, right? Because you can get in the house, right? They can give you that down payment assistance, but then how do you maintain that house? And so while traveling to work for State Voices, I was in Detroit working with City Council and the mayor of Detroit about 3.5 years ago. And what Detroit did was, there was a community that they wanted. They just wanted this land. It was an old apartment complex. And they wanted the land, and and they want to take the land one way or another. And so they went to these residents and they had conversations for about a year and a half saying, we want your property basically, if we're going to take your property, but we're also going to give you something in return. And so what they did was they built brand new homes, little starter homes. And over that year and a half course, they started training these people. They started giving them access to to college or to trade so that they could be prepared. They gave them, it was required that they attended weekly workshops on like how to manage your bank account, how to save money. And they prepared these people to be adults. And they were already adults, but they prepared them to be mature adults. And they literally gave these people keys to their brand new homes that they cannot sell for 7 years, right? But I watched them do this, and I'm like, if they're doing this in Detroit, then why can't we do it in Greenville? If they're doing it in Detroit, why can't we do it in District 25? And I know we can do it, we just have to sit down and have a conversation about how we get there. And it wasn't an easy process, because people, they lived in these apartments for 20, 30, 40 years, and they were used to all they had. They didn't trust the government for obvious reasons. And so, but Detroit did it, and I know it can be done in other places. And so those are some of the housing for me is one of the main priorities. And it's not just affording a house, but also maintain that house.
Similar in that vein, the main issue that we see in District 25 as well as districts like ours is the affordability issue. And affordability is a broad issue. It includes housing, but it includes some other things as well. Right now in our district, our poverty level for District 25 is twice as large as the county as a whole. We got to fix that. And so there are some things that we can do. We can talk about housing, which I will come back around to, but how do we tackle this from a grassroots level? We got to do actually two approaches. We got to have the legislative approach, the stuff that we can do from a policy standpoint. But what I'm learning is more impactful is the grassroots approach. And so starting from a grassroots standpoint, we got to take full advantage of the opportunities that we have here. One of the things that we've got to really begin to do is have the conversation in our community, and we've been doing that, is that we got to realize and accept the direction that Greenville County is going. Greenville is developing its own economy, and we can't be oblivious to that. You got to watch and pay attention to where the money is flowing. Here in Greenville County, the money is going after healthcare, the money is going after aviation, the money is going after automotive, advanced manufacturing, and cyber technology. Those are the 5 areas. We got to have those conversations. And now we got to start having what I call strategic education. If we're going to invest ourselves in education, we got to invest in those things that are going to pay us and pay us well. Right now, we are recruiting several companies to come in. I'm grateful for the work that Tavi and those folks are doing. But sometimes there's a gap between our people being prepared and the opportunities that are coming. We've got to bridge that gap. And we've got the resources to do it. We just haven't bridged the gap. We've got one of the best technical schools in this state in Greenville Tech. And so we've been working very closely with them in terms of trying to make sure that our community knows what's available to them. Fighting on the legislative side to make sure that it remains affordable and so that the price doesn't go up. Continue to fight with that when we're doing our budgeting process. Also promoting to the residents of my community some of the wonderful programs they have. Accelerate You. Anybody ever heard about that at Greenville Tech? Accelerate You. It is incredible. Accelerate You targets Southside, Carolina, and Berea High School. Greenville Tech will literally come and pick our babies up from those schools, transport them over to college so they can begin to learn a trade. And it's free. It is free. They pay for the books and everything. And these trades are providing some incredible income. My mind was blown by the welding program. Had a conversation with a young fellow he's doing traveling. He's a traveling welder. Makes $400,000 a year. And so there are some things that we need to tap into right now. But also in that same vein, we also have to have conversations about our adult re-education. Some of our older folks really got to consider going back to school because the industries have changed. They have changed, which is compounding the gap between what people are making and what they can afford in the city. And so we got to have those conversations. That's grassroots stuff. But at the same time, we got to continue to push legislation in Columbia that comes up with creative ways to bring down housing. Our present structure for affordable housing takes too long, and we don't take it very seriously because we're not putting enough money behind it. Our state as a whole may set aside $23 million for low-income housing tax credits. That's $23 million for the whole state, y'all. That can get consumed with one project down in Charleston. And so we now have to come up with creative ways. If you go back and you go pull me up on the website for the house and you look at some of the bills I proposed, one of the ones that's really gaining some traction is the Religious Institutions Affordable Housing bill. What that does is allows churches who have ample land to contract out with developers and allow the developers to come onto the church's property to build affordable housing, and it still is tax-free. Normally, you got to go through all the red tape to have tax-free property. But if the church is already tax-free, that already solves the problem. We're not taking money away from the county. They don't pay property taxes anyway, so let's build on those properties and begin to turn some dirt a little bit faster. We have to begin to figure out how to bring more housing faster. Our present process is just too slow. And so we got to be creative on the legislative side. So I do encourage you to go pull me up and go read some of the different ways I presented that we can begin to make this happen a little faster.
Excuse me. Well, I'm going to change tactics a little bit. I was a teacher. I taught in Georgetown County for a year, and then I taught for a number of years in Spartanburg County. When I started teaching, my paycheck was consumed with rent, groceries, which were ramen noodles for the most part, because rent was high down in Georgetown County at that time. It's still high. But the pay for teachers is one thing that's very important to me. And retaining teachers, good teachers, is very important to me. When I started out, that paycheck was not enough to save money, not enough to make a plan for the future. It was paycheck to paycheck every month. They have started new teachers with a pay raise. But we are also looking at inflation. We're looking at gas prices that have skyrocketed. We're going to the grocery store, and what you pay for just the ingredients for a meal, you're debating on whether or not I should go eat out because it might be cheaper. It's crazy. We are making strides in things like raising teacher pay, but we can't stop there. And we can't stop at the $2,000 a year raise that we have given to teachers now. We have to keep moving that up to pay teachers what they are worth. They do a lot of unpaid work. And if you teach school, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't teach school, you should know what I'm talking about. Because they go in at 7:15 in the morning. They don't leave at the 2:45 or 3:15 that their pay scale says they're getting paid for. It's usually 4:15 or even 5 o'clock. They are coming back in the evenings for special events. They are taking their own time to do, to grade papers, to meet with parents, to have conferences, to work with kids after school. All of that is unpaid. And if you flesh out what their hourly wage is, it is not even minimum wage in some cases. They need to get paid more, and we cannot stand on our laurels and say, oh, well, we've raised their pay. That's great, that's a starting point. But then you start looking at also what's happening, and this speaks to affordability a little bit too, with the income tax. And yes, lowering the income tax sounds fantastic until you realize it's going to become a shell game, because that money's got to come from somewhere. And it's going to be consumer taxes. So our high grocery prices are going to get higher. And that paycheck and that $2,000 raise those teachers got is going to go not as far as it goes now. And that's really not that far. So it is vital that we continue to work towards making teaching a profession that is as respected as others that require the same kind of training and the same kind of hours on a day-to-day basis. Looking at a teacher, we also need to look too at what's happening with our the voucher program that was pushed through.
that the supermajority voted on and said, yeah, we're going to do this, and there are no real guardrails around that. And we have seen the debacle that has emerged from that with fraud within the homeschooling, getting the money from the voucher programs with not enough limitations and restrictions and oversight around it. And when that was presented as we need to do this, it didn't go through. So we still have this money that should be going into our public schools that could be helping fund breakfast, which was not voted on. It could be funding other initiatives to help our teachers, to help our students, to help them thrive. Those are the things that we should be looking at. We certainly shouldn't be debating about what we're going to paste on the walls in our classrooms that is going through, because that's not getting us anywhere either. So, just to wrap up, because I just saw a minute aside and I can keep on going with this. Education is a passion of mine. It has always been important to me. It's why I taught school for as long as I did. It's why I still look at teachers out there and say, you need a voice, let me be your voice. And it is why we need to continue to push through reforms in our public education system to make it the strongest system that it can be for our teachers, but more importantly for our students and our communities. Thank you.
Thanks. So I'm probably going to continue along that thread, which I also think is important for us to recognize that the four people who have shown up here today to talk to you all are probably fairly aligned in the way we think about how good government needs to work. And that means something, because South Carolina has been at the bottom of the barrel in education for decades. We have this same supermajority that is pushing different ways of trying to fix that. And it's not that it's not getting fixed, it's not going anywhere. It is stuck. So education is a similar passion of mine. And everything you've heard up here is valid, and I think that's why we're all talking about it. Everything I look at in South Carolina that I think of as a problem, whether it's crime, affordability, employment issues, all goes back to education. And what are we doing for our children? So I think that the teacher pay is absolutely important, but we don't need to stop there. We need to figure out what else can we do in the school system to support students and teachers. So the teachers are spending their time teaching kids in whatever unique way they need to be taught. And kids are learning in whatever unique way they need to be taught. Even in one classroom, if you have 15 or 20 elementary school age children, they're not all going to learn the same way. They're not all going to do the same thing. They're not all going to have the same support systems. But the one thing you can be guaranteed, should be guaranteed in America, is that from the time you turn 5 to the time you turn 18, you have a place to go. You have a place to go that's free. You have a place to go where you should be fed. You have a place to go where you have someone to talk to. At my kids' elementary school, there is a counselor there who talks to the kids about the little problems that happen on the elementary school playground. And I think about how important that is for these kids to know if they don't have a support system at home, or they have less resources to turn to, that school is there. So we need to think about not just what we're doing with teachers, but what other staff, what other support systems, what other things are we doing so that these kids have the best opportunity they can have. And when I heard Representative Jones talking about kind of these programs as they get older, you know, my father ran for a school board years ago and lost. He kind of ran it his own way, wouldn't take any money from anybody, and he stuck his message. But his message was great. And it was that we were spending so much time worrying about either getting kids into four-year prestigious colleges or ignoring them. And what a great example, $400,000 a year welding. I mean, that's not just making a good living. That is building the kind of wealth that goes down for generations to come. And you don't even need to make that much. You know, we have a middle class in America that has been essentially abandoned because we don't pay attention to it anymore. And these places that we have around here, BMW, and then the various offshoots, the factories and the plants and the suppliers that spring up around that place, Michelin has been here forever. All these people, when I talk to the people that work there, they're looking for people that can come and do these jobs that they need done. And a four-year degree that costs now hundreds of thousands of dollars is completely unnecessary. Like they said earlier, we got free technical education in one of the best technical systems in the United States. Why on earth are we sitting at 49, 48, fighting with 2 other states to be the lowest ranked education system in America? It's a hard thing to figure out, but I can tell you one start, when you see people up here that are aligned, thinking that way, that's the kind of people we need to put in office so that we can unite with a voice so that these kids, that are our future, can have somewhere to go, some opportunity to make our place better. And I think that immediately starts to improve every other problem we see in the state of South Carolina.
How would you define effective leadership, and how will you ensure your constituents feel heard and represented?
Whichever candidate.
How about that, sir? So we don't force them to do it. So if I had come here to give a speech, this was actually one of the things I was going to talk about is what leadership looks like right now, because I'm not sure we have a whole bunch of good examples And I will say, we do have one representative here who I'm going to exclude from that, because that, the way I'm listening to him talk about what's happening down there, I'm like, I need more people like this. We have an opportunity to support some people up here to make that happen. But the reason we don't have that leadership goes right back to what I said at the beginning, which is that we cannot separate politics from government. So it has become a business. I'm probably too honest, which people in my campaign don't probably love sometimes, but I'm a lawyer. And lawyers get beat up pretty bad going down to the legislature because most of them take advantage of that role and make a lot of money. I don't know how you do that. I can't quite figure out how they're doing it. I don't really care how they're doing it because it's not something I plan to do. Because it's not going to help any of you, the citizens of South Carolina, and it's going to help nobody in District 22. And that's what's been lost over the years. There was a time, I think, I remember talking to my grandfather, who was a Massachusetts Republican. So he understood the super minority role. But, he talked about politicians that were statesmen, that were class acts, that spoke to people with respect, that listened to people. Obviously, it's always fun to talk to people who agree with you because you can really get going and come up with some good ideas. But I know in District 22, the numbers are very split. And it's about a half and half between the two parties, Democrat and Republican. And if I get elected, I think one of the things that matters to me is that everyone gets heard, because that starts to lower the temperature of what we're seeing, when you feel like you have a voice. So leadership in many ways is listening, and it's listening to what your voters need and explaining what you're doing. The number one thing I hear when I tell people that I'm friends with, my neighbors that live in District 22, that I'm running for House of Representatives, what does that mean? What do you do down there? And I think they're saying that because they, number one, don't know. And if they did know, they would be disappointed that they don't feel like things are happening. And specific to District 22, we see these flurries of activity. So there's credible challengers now to the incumbent. So we're seeing all this activity, but again, it's all performative. There's not any real leadership. It's about fundraising, it's about re-election, it's about keeping that position. I was talking to a good friend of mine this morning who probably doesn't align with me on a whole lot of political views, but he's a reasonable guy. And he said, you sound a little bit reluctant about this whole thing. I was like, no, I want to win. And I'm happy I'm doing it, but yeah, I'm a little bit reluctant about getting in to this world. And he said, well, you have my vote if I lived in the district, because that's what we need. We need people who are going down there to serve. And it's not particularly, I think we heard, it's not joyful. It certainly should be profitable. I mean, to me, the idea of using your government position to make money is so against the ideals this country was founded on and what we want those people to be down there doing. So I can tell you this, I have met with the chief federal judge. I'm going to meet with the chief judges here about the fact that if I were to win this office, I don't intend to take advantage of it. I intend to ask them to help me make my schedule where I can get my work done before I have to go down and after I get back. I don't have any interest in working for the state. I don't have any interest in getting into one of these agreements with the Attorney General where I get paid a bunch of money, because honestly, I wouldn't have any interest in that under any circumstance, but I think that's such a conflict of interest, and that's probably what we need to think about when we think about leadership, working for people. You know, working for people doesn't mean grifting them, or taking money from them, or taking advantage of them. It means helping, it means listening, and that's what I intend to do.
To dovetail a little bit on what he said, leadership to me is service. And it is serving the people who send you down to Columbia. The last, I guess, 2 weeks now, we have seen those take place. And I'm going to step back from that real quick and just say this. They've gotten a lot done in the last, I don't know, 2 weeks. A lot done because they wanted to get it done. And there are things that are still sitting in committee that actually impact all of us, and they're still sitting in committee, which means they're dead. So we've been shown this week that stuff can get done when it needs to get done. But what we are seeing too are members of that supermajority who, instead of serving the people who elected them, are serving Washington. Instead of protecting the people of South Carolina and protecting their voices, they are protecting their jobs. And in my opinion, if you are not serving and protecting the people who elected you, those people need to vote you out. I'm so angry in the last 2 weeks because there are things, and my campaign manager just laughed because she's heard a lot of it. There are things that we can be doing that I think, to your point, would make serving down there perhaps a little more joyful because we would be seeing the effects on the people that we are supposed to serve. If we got away from the partisan theater that has been taking place down there. When someone jumps into this redistricting debate and decides to shove in something about the restrictive abortion bill, that's theater. That's, oh, I've got another chance to stand up and start speaking. Let me start speaking about something else that's not related to what we're doing here. We need to get down there, and we need to, A, listen to the people who sent us down there. Talk to them. Town halls, events like this. Answering the phone, responding to emails, hearing from you. That, to me, is the most important thing that any of us can do when we get to Columbia, is listen to you. And then look at what is going to best serve our constituents, and that is what we do. Instead of serving ourselves, instead of protecting our political power, our political careers. And I'm just going to go ahead and tell you, I don't usually say this out loud, but I'm almost 58 years old. I ain't going down there for 30 years. So when I get down there, I am going to make the most of the time I have down there, and I am going to work for you. That, to me, is what leading in this state should look like. We see it in a handful of people down there, and it needs to be at least half the people down there, hopefully a majority. But we've got a lot of people running against those who have decided that that is now their seat. And for the record, it ain't their seat. It's your seat. All right? But it will always be. So when we hit June 9th for the primary, and then when we hit November 3rd, voting for the people who are there to serve you is how your voices get heard. And that is what is important to me about leading from this perspective. Thank you.
An effective leader to me is somebody who's simply able to get things done. And I'll be honest with you, in the climate that we are in, they made it very difficult for those of us who sit on this side of the aisle to get things done. That doesn't sit very well with the people in my district because our pain is very real. The people have been waiting for change for decades. And even with me saying that, please hear me when I say this, because by me saying that they've been waiting for decades, that's a reality for change to come. But that is not me criticizing the people that came before me. Because having had the opportunity to get there, I realized what a supermajority can do to resist your efforts. They get to decide what comes up, what bills are pushed forward, they get to decide that. And it's not a place that you can protest your way in to get things done, and yell your way in to get things done. You gotta build relationships, and I'm telling you this right now, it takes longer than you wanted to take. Way longer than you wanted to take, because you gotta go back home to people who are still impatiently waiting for things to get done. But we still have to be determined down there to try to push the agenda. One of the things I've learned to do in these 4 years that I've been down there, I've realized I could not fix all the problems of my district in 4 years. I'm not Jesus. But I'm beginning to see how this stuff works. And so one of the things I've been able to concentrate on is trying to get resources back to my district. They push back when I try to get bills passed, and we've been able to move some along, but not as much as I wish we would have been able to. But we've been able to get dollars back. Why should that even matter to you? Because I begin to understand, I'm a student of this thing, I study it day and night, I'm kind of obsessed with it. And I begin to learn what does it take to really stabilize the community. And there's really 4 things, y'all, that stabilize the community. First of all is what you're doing tonight. People gotta be politically engaged. You gotta have that. We gotta have more ownership, home ownership, business ownership, things of that sort. We gotta have strong non-profit organizations in your community. And last but not least, you gotta have a strong small business community. When I begin to realize that, I began to figure out that I don't need Columbia to make that happen. And so we began to do more grassroots work. I just left a few minutes ago the D25 business incubator where I'm using my own gifts and my own resources because we got to train up our future business owners. Because as we grow our entrepreneurial base, that speeds our ability to own. One of our problems is we can't control the district that we don't own. And so we got to equip our people to be able to own. And not only that, as we grow our businesses, we get to hire our neighbors. And as we hire our neighbors, we begin to be able to keep the wealth inside of that. So we're already building that. Got tired of waiting on Columbia, we're going to do it ourselves. But also in that same vein, being able to support some of our nonprofits. They're changing the rules on us, where now they don't want to send money back into the district unless you can prove that that nonprofit already has a contractual relationship with the state, with a public institution. They create barriers after barriers. But we do have some that are capable of that, and so we're trying to empower them and bring those dollars back. We're also bringing in folks and beginning to do some home ownership training and partner with people like Pinnacle Bank. We're working real hard to try to get Optus Bank to bring some bricks and mortar up here. They already have a lender up here. I'm begging and pleading with them to come and show your face because Optus Bank, if you don't know, Optus Bank is the last minority-owned bank in the state. I think that would send wonderful messages to our folks here. But what I'm learning is that, why, again, to go back to the question that was asked of me in the beginning, why do I feel like I'm the right person for this? I'm a builder. And I realize I know how to build stuff. And what we've got to do now, we've got to build our own stuff. We really do. And every leader that we have ever had in history has come to that conclusion. That oftentimes we're too busy trying to be invited to a table and we need to be busy building our own so that we can secure our own future. That's not me promoting tribalism. That's not me promoting being separate. That's me promoting economics. Economics says we got to produce our own stuff. And we are well capable of doing that. We have some incredibly talented people. We've got some wonderful talent coming up in our youth. What we've got to do now is come together. I tell people all the time, I said, you can't be in last place and divided. And so we've got to get past our petty differences and realize that we got to combine our forces, our resources, our expertise, because this is a bewitching hour. If you don't realize we're in trouble, I don't know where you've been lately. And so if we don't get it together this time, we may not have a chance to get it together. And so we're working real hard at bringing us together, leveraging the stuff that we have so that we can become the strong community I know we're destined to be.
Our next topic is education. So sorry.
For me, I think leadership is measured by impact and not by a title or anything of that nature. And I've made a lot of impact in this community, which is why I'm running for state representative. One of the things that I was able to accomplish, and it was not a state issue, but it's an issue that affects a lot of people, is a few months ago, you all saw on social media, where a group of black girls went right on the corner of Unity Park to go and walk. And they were simply just going to walk and exercise with black women and black girls. And they were told to leave the park in 2026. They were told they could not come back in the evening. They had planned to walk that evening. And when they made the post on social media, they didn't know it was going to be that many girls to show them walk, right? But they were just wanting to walk, to exercise, and just be outdoors. And they were told they would not come back in the evening. And so they reached out to me and a few other people in the community. And that following Monday, we met with the city manager, the assistant city manager, the director of Parks and Recreation. And initially, we met for about an hour and a half. They pushed back on what we were suggesting. We were suggesting they change the policy so that people could come in the park and just do what they want to do, as long as it was not breaking the law. And for about an hour or so, they pushed back on this until I turned the heat up a little bit. And they literally changed a policy that had been in place since 1974. And those girls able to go back to the park. And they've been back twice since then. I think one's in the room, I just saw her walk in, and I thought. But they've been to the park twice since then and walked free without having to worry about anybody bothering them. That was a huge win. Another thing is, and there's some parents in the room today, St. Anthony's School, and these are not really state issues, but these are issues that affect our community. St. Anthony's has a new principal, and I'll make it real quickly, and the principal has been kicking kids out of school left and right. About 25 kids he's kicked out since he's been there. And I met with the principal quite a few times, and I met with him about 2.5 weeks ago, and he told me he was going to meet with me because I'm an activist. And so I reached out to the diocese, and I sent an email to the diocese, and I'm meeting with them this coming Tuesday. And I know that a lot of people have concerns about the way St. Anthony's is doing what they're doing to our kids, to our community, and not just to our kids, but to the parents, to the men, right, who have kids in that school, how they're directly attacking those people. And so we're dealing with that. I just got an attorney yesterday who's going to work with these teachers because they've also terminated all of the teachers except for about 5 of them. And so these are issues that are happening in our communities that we don't talk about. And if you're going to represent their community, you gotta represent the entire community. Also, this past Wednesday, I went, not in Greenville County, but it's still an issue. I got a lot of phone calls about the way that Spartanburg County was operating their jail. I reached out to the sheriff, I met with the sheriff, the manager of the jail, 2 captains, and a lieutenant. And they gave me a tour of the entire facility. I walked inside every dorm, every cell in that facility. I walked inside, and I talked to inmates about some of the things that I got contacted about. I walked into a lockup unit. I walked into every single unit in that jail, and I saw what some of the concerns were valid concerns. And we sat back down and we talked about how to address those concerns. I didn't put it on social media. I didn't make a big deal about it because I'm working with Spartanburg County to address those concerns. Same thing in Greenville, right? Because you cannot forget about the little people, right? And when I say little, I mean, I'm not calling them little, but they made choices in their lives that have made them smaller to other people, right? And they're like tucked away and they're not visibly seen because they're locked away. But we can't forget about them because they're somebody's son, somebody's daughter, somebody's grandchild. And so, for me, as a state representative, I'm going to make sure that I have a strong constituent office, constituent services, because much of the work you do is responding to the issues that your constituents are dealing with. Whether it's a housing concern, whether it's somebody in jail, whether it's an issue with a courthouse, no matter what it is. And speaking of courthouse, as I take my last minute, there's a courthouse in District 25. It's the only courthouse in the district, or in Greenville County really, that's in a trailer. And about a month and a half ago, I went to that trailer. I made a video. But prior to that, I met with 4 judges, the chief magistrate and 3 other judges and the county council chairman about improving that facility. And the chairman of the county council committed to helping find money to build a new building. That's what being a leader is about. Democrat, Republican, black, white, doesn't matter. It's getting the work done, and I'm committed to doing that.
Now, the next topic is education. Candidates will now have 3 minutes to answer questions. How do you propose addressing school funding disparities, and student achievement gaps.
Start us off.
So I've already talked a little bit about the teacher retention, and I will briefly address a little bit more about that. You know, they are expected to do a lot with a little in terms of resources, but I also cannot fathom why they don't get the respect that they deserve, because they are the foundation of our education system. And we are having issues with teacher retention. We are losing new teachers, young teachers who get in there and don't feel supported. The pay notwithstanding, they are getting, they have to have the testing done by a certain time. They are having an overtest, but they're not getting the results of that testing in a timely fashion to actually inform the way they're teaching our children. They are also expected to test all children, regardless of what their IEP or their disability might be. They have to test them. And then we look at where we land in the country, and we are 47th, 48th, because we are testing children who don't need to be tested. I met with someone the other day whose child has a disability, whose child will always have a disability, and yet they are having to take time every year to prove that this child still has a disability, to get out of the testing or to have accommodations made for that testing. That's wasting the teacher's time, it's wasting the child's time. Those scores are affecting the scores that are being reported, because that's not a child who should be tested. That's a child who should have other metrics to use to grade how they are progressing. But those are some of the issues that teachers are dealing with. There is the actual, another teacher I spoke to has a child with a disability. His home school does not provide the services he needs, so she has to take him to another school while she teaches at a third school. And she has to be there at 7:15, but she can't drop a child off until 7. And it takes her 30 minutes to get to school. So those kind of things in terms of teacher retention and addressing how we can help them and how we can support them is very important. The learning gap, looking at how children learn, looking at how we need to be teaching them individually within the context of a classroom is also important. And when we are burdening teachers and students with over-testing and not getting the results of those tests in a way that they can then address those children's needs, we are already starting so far behind the mark. So looking at what our testing looks like, looking at what our State Department of Education is doing and supporting a qualified superintendent of state education to make sure that making sure that they are supported in getting things accomplished in our school systems. That is what is important as a legislator.
I'll piggyback on what Caroline said. I think one of the first things that we need to be real serious about as far as our education system is changing the leadership. Right now, our Secretary of Education is not a fan of public school. She is an advocate for vouchers. She was an advocate for even closing the Federal Department of Education. That is not somebody that should be making decisions for us. I think Sylvia Wright will be an incredible replacement down in Columbia for that position. Because also in the Department of Education, that's where the request originate from in terms of what we pay our teachers. Right now, our state average is about $48,000. Greenville does a little bit better because of the position that we're in. I think it was about $52,000. We got to do better. And so one of the things you have to do when you're in Columbia is that you got to lobby inside the building too. And if there's something that really matters to you, you got to talk to Ways and Means about how do we fund this, how can we boost this. That is something that I've been committed to. I've been excited, even though we're not there yet, Caroline. I've been excited that we've been able to boost it every year at about $2,000. But our goal should be to get around $65,000 as a starting salary for our teachers. That's how we retain the quality teachers that we have. But also in that same vein, when it comes to the disparities between our schools, simply put, guys, we need to change our formula. First of all, we got a funding formula that we don't even adhere to. Every year we break the law. We have a formula that says that we are supposed to adequately fund our schools. We fall short of that every single funding season. That has to change. But also to drill down and be a little bit more specific, we need to change the funding in that it needs to be, and I hope this makes sense, is that we need to weight it a little bit more heavily. There should be weights on it that allow us to fund our schools that are in impoverished areas a little differently than the other schools. Because our impoverished areas absolutely need more funding. Because we need funding for transportation, because many of our babies are riding the bus. We need funding for meal plans. We need funding to be able to recruit teachers to come into those schools, because those schools are oftentimes stigmatized. They don't deserve it, but they're stigmatized, and it's hard to get somebody to come in. We have to be honest about that, and when we put policy together, we put budgets together to say these schools require more funding. And if we just change and follow some of the patterns that other schools are doing, Massachusetts leads the state, leads the nation in how they fund. We just need to follow them and quit pretending that we've got it figured out. There's some folks who already do it well. We just need to duplicate that here in South Carolina and continue to make it a priority. The budget says what matters most to you. We need to make sure that our budget says that education matters most to us.
I think, of course, funding our teacher pay is a huge issue. We talked about that, but I think also, Caroline mentioned it, that teachers are overworked. They're not just teaching, they're breaking up fights. They're having to be a mental health counselor. They're having to wash kids' clothes to come to school because their parents don't have washing and dryers at home. And I know this because I mentor 2 schools in Reba County, Thomas E. Kearns and Southside. And I see the kids that come into these schools. And I see the kids that get picked on because they don't have the latest shoes, they don't have iPhones, they don't have the latest technology. They just want to learn. And we want our kids to be prepared and be smart and be successful. But our legislator and our superintendent is not preparing our teachers to be successful. Because as Caroline mentioned, you can't drop your child off at 7:05 and they'd be at work at 7:30. It's just impossible. And that's the story of a lot of people that I know, a lot of teachers I know in this community, because I talk to them daily. In fact, one of my neighbors is a teacher, and we talk all the time about some of the issues that she sees in her classroom. In fact, she was an assistant principal when she went back to the classroom because of all the politics of being an administrator at a school, right? And so we've got to make sure that we support our teachers and give them, as we did in the colleges, academic freedom, to teach their kids in a way that their kids need to learn, because every classroom can't learn the same. Every child can't learn the same. I'm not promoting this, but I have a friend of mine who was a teacher at Tanglewood Middle School, and I went to speak to his class one day. And he kept saying, all right, y'all, sit down, sit down, sit down. And they wouldn't sit down. And he said, sit y'all asses down. And they sat down. Excuse my French. And they understood that language. And I asked myself, why did y'all respond when the teacher cussed? Why did y'all just respond when he said, sit down, sit down, sit down? And they said, because that's what we used to. That's how we do it at home. And so sometimes you have to meet these kids where they are as a teacher, right? I'm not saying cuss the kids out, but sometimes they respect you more, right? When they understand that you can get down to their level, so to speak. And that's how you educate these kids. When I worked at a school in Texas, one of my roles was I was a student success director, and I just make sure every student graduated on time. And we had this standardized testing that every student had to take, and I realized that every student wasn't a test taker. And so we got rid of those standardized testing to make sure that every student was able to graduate on time. And so what we did was we put them in these remedial courses and helped them to get up to level so that they were not having to take extra courses in the summertime. And so that's what we need to do here also to support our teachers, to make sure that we give them more pay, but also give them the resources they need to teach their classes successfully.
So now I see why no one really wants to get last, because all the good ideas have been discussed. But I think that tells you something. I think that tells you, again, the candidates you're seeing up here that have this through line of these good ideas are the people we need to be supporting, people we need to go out and talk to. out, you go to other parts of the state where the same little girls or little boys that should have the exact same starting line aren't gonna have it because we have failed those public schools. So all the ideas that you've heard up here are great ideas. But the important part about this is money. That goes back to that leadership thing. We need to fund these schools, like we've heard, in a way where my kids at Stone Academy are on the same starting line with the kids in Hampton County, because that means all those kids can build a better future for us. Every problem we have comes from this wealth gap, which is now bled into education, where every year the top and the bottom get further and further apart. And some people are fostering that. They want that to happen. That keeps sort of these entrenched institutions in power. A better way to do it would be to get rid of that gap, to bring people closer together, to give everybody the same opportunity, because that helps us all. And that's going to cost money. It's going to take money. So when I look at the State House and I look at what's happening down there, and I hear the few voices, like Representative Jones, like some of the other people I see that are down there fighting and banging that drum, trying to make things fair, we have to demand that from the people that we put in office. And specifically with education, we have to have people who understand if that starting line's not the same for everybody, it's going to negatively affect us all. Sitting in our corner of the place where there's privilege, or sitting where we don't have to worry about these problems or care about these kids that have other things going on, that don't have parental support, that don't have resources, that's going to affect us all negatively. But it just goes back to when these kids are 5 and they enter school, they should enter on the same footing as everybody. Right now, I agree with what everyone said. We have leadership in education on the state level that's trying to make sure no one starts on the same footing. Ask yourself why. There's got to be some dark reason to do that. We need to get rid of that. We need to make sure everybody has a fair opportunity.
The next topic is economic development and housing. How can our communities attract economic growth while ensuring longtime residents are not displaced?
I see the wheels are turning. Representative Jones is ready.
I am, because this is my passion. Here is how it is presently set up. Economic development travels and follows the money. And so oftentimes, especially in the area of food deserts, we haven't been able to get the investments that we need. Because those who are looking to be profitable, whether it be grocery stores or restaurants or what have you, they come in and see what is the average income in that area. And if they believe that the folks don't have enough discretionary income, they bypass it. We haven't had, our whole district is not one that does not get investments like grocery stores and what have you, but they normally show up in the more wealthier parts of our town. And so when we realize what the root cause is that the average household income needs to improve, then that has to be the focus. The focus has to be, how do we raise those average household incomes? What resources can we tap into for those folks who are still of a working age? And so again, I'm going to sound like a broken record. We've got to take full advantage of our education system so our people can be trained to take the jobs that are here. If we don't do that, y'all, they're going to just keep transporting people in, transplanting people in. Folks are hearing all about Greenwood, a wonderful place to live, and y'all know we're growing about leaps and bounds because those folks are showing up. And when these folks are ready to expand at Lockheed, ready to expand at 3M, folks are moving from up north and out west. We got people right here that if we can just get them plugged into our training systems, then we can also take care of them here. And it is an issue that we ought to be concerned about, and I know they get sick of me talking about it because of the list. I said, we're going to create a problem that's going to cause this whole thing to collapse. Because if we keep making this gap between the haves and the have-nots, it is not sustainable. You cannot continue to neglect the people who made Greenville great by just taking care of the people who come to Greenville. And so we have to make sure that we can make it doable. And that's why I push it for our kids that are coming through, that in 10th grade and 11th grade, say, guys, these are the job opportunities. We actually created some curriculum at my church where we started to train our kids to begin to look at the cost of living in Greenwood. And we actually sold that curriculum to some other churches, maybe some folks here that are using our curriculum, that we're training our babies to realize that your education has to match where you want to live. It has to match where you want to live, because there are jobs for you. You just have to be trained. It is almost virtually impossible now. Those days are gone, y'all, where you can just graduate and get a good job. Textile mills are gone. And so now you need certification to make it. And we've got that. We've got that ability. You can do it in 6 months, 18 months, 24 months, and it can change your life. We've got kids now graduating from high school who tap into the cyber technology building over off of Rutherford Road that can leave high school making $30 and $40 an hour because they've been trained in cyber technology. We've got to have those conversations around the table. And as we begin to make more money, money follows money. More people begin to move in and invest in our community. So we have to begin to do that. We can yell at it all we want, but they're not coming if they don't think they can survive. We have to give them something to survive on, and we are more than capable of that. And so not only will we get stores and restaurants, man, we'll finally get some peace of mind. We'll get some relief. Folks won't be living on the edge. Folks need relief. And we've got to please start having those conversations. Let's go back to school. Let's get it together. Let's take these jobs ourselves, and then we can make sure that we stabilize our community.
One of the things that interests me about economic development within our communities and working to help the people who are already living here succeed is investigating what public-private partnerships are available out there. A friend that I've been talking to quite a bit lately owns a company, it's a nonprofit in North Carolina, and they are dying to move into South Carolina to do what they do. They are bridging the digital divide so that when we have companies like Lockheed and Boeing and BMW coming in, let's use them to our advantage, not just for the jobs that they are providing, but how can that then ripple into our communities? So the company I'm talking about, they go into these big corporations and they get their laptops, because every couple of years they do a whole shift in what they're doing with their technology, and there are all these laptops. And they will get them, they train students, they try to go into the high schools and the technical colleges to train students, to wipe them clean, reprogram them, and then they are available for people, not just students, but for adults who are starting new businesses, so that they are not having to then invest money into new technology. They are getting things for free that have actually already provided training, and it becomes a cycle, because then we've got kids who are now trained with this technology to go into companies and work for them in IT, but then we are providing technology for individuals who want to start businesses, or for students who maybe aren't able to afford a laptop themselves. They are getting that service that they need. It's also keeping it out of the landfills. So there are all of these things that are happening that work together, where public and private interests can work together. We can leverage our existing companies, our existing corporations and industries, use them to then build at a grassroots level smaller businesses, privately owned businesses, individuals who are deciding to become entrepreneurs, helping support them. And all of that whole cycle helps generate additional economic, excuse me, I need to drink some water, economic growth in our communities. And it helps at every level, because then we can look at those corporations, they're probably going to get a little tax write-off for doing that, but at the same time, they are giving back to the communities where they are living, so that it's not just the jobs that they are providing, but it is a future that they are providing for others in the community who may not work with them.
So I love that we have Michelin and Boeing and BMW and Scout and all these big companies coming here, and we think about the other end of the spectrum because I think about my wife's business. I think about the business that started in the basement with 2 customers making casseroles, delivering them by herself with no employees. And I think about what it took to go from that to the current business that has 2 stores. There's satellite operations all over the city. There's deliveries going on all over the place. And I think about how she fought to get to a couple different places. So first of all, like I said earlier, no one there makes minimum wage. She pays people a lot. She pays them fair wages. She cuts people in on profits. And that allows them to grow that business and foster that business. We also fight with the local government. We fight with the state government for construction permits, for licensing issues, for retail licenses, for alcohol licenses, for everything that's required to run that business. And then when we're done with all that fighting, we turn around and we pay the government a pretty large portion of the profits in taxes. And that's about why we have government right now not necessarily working for us, helping us. So one of the ways that we can drive economics in a place like Greenville, but all over the state, is to pay attention to those small businesses and come up with ways to reward people for doing the right thing and building businesses. Because what we need to worry about, we want the big companies, we want the big economic powerhouses to come into South Carolina. But we also don't want to walk down Main Street in Greenville and see businesses that are run by hedge funds and corporate people that live in other states and other parts of the country, because we're going to lose what we all love about South Carolina. I always think about this article I read out west about a guy who became very, very rich in the commercial real estate world. But what he decided to do was make sure that he would spend more time fostering local businesses in the city that he started in, even if they couldn't pay him the maximum value of his properties. And what he ended up with was a city where there was local business, profitable local businesses, attractive local businesses, but people that could make a living. And he made a little bit less money. And I get it, we don't want to ask everybody to have to give up, but that is part of the society we live in. But as a state house, we can tell someone, if that's what you're going to do, if that's how you're going to help your community, we can help you out on the back end. We can make things easier for your licensing. We can make things easier for your investments. And we can certainly make things easy when it comes to tax time. And then we'll end up having the kind of community we want to look at, where our friends and our neighbors are not just customers of businesses, but they're owning businesses. So the amount of money that we can drive into an economy by fostering all these local businesses and all these smaller players ends up, as an aggregate, really changing the nature of what we have. But it ties into what we've been talking about up here. Now that kid who started on the same starting point at 5 years old, got out at 18, had training, had the ability to run their own business, now that kid starts a business. And now everybody starts to do that. We all start to work as a community. And I think that's really important. I think it's being left behind as that gap keeps increasing, where the wealthy get wealthier, the poor get poorer, and neither one of them has any chance of crossing ways. And the way we do that is to give everybody the same starting point and drive them into a position where it makes sense for them to run and start their small business.
When talking about economics, I have 2 neighbors that I pick on all the time. One is from Pennsylvania, and they're in their 50s. And they bought their home a month before I bought mine, and they paid cash for that house. Cash. I have another neighbor who lives another street over from me, moved from Florida. Same thing, paid cash for that house. And I have another neighbor who moved from Ohio, same thing, paid cash. She works at out in Donaldson Center.
Lockheed.
Second?
Lockheed?
At Lockheed, yes, thank you. And so I had her at my house when I ran for county council, and I asked them, I said, how did you all come to South Carolina and buy your houses cash? Because their houses were cheap. And they said, we sold our homes in our respective states, and we got a lot of money for our houses, and we came here and bought our houses. And I said, so why did you move to South Carolina? And my neighbor at Lockheed said that Lockheed recruited him from Ohio. They went to Ohio, they found him, and moved him and his family to South Carolina. And I said, well, what credentials, like what education, what do you have that makes you, not in a disrespectful way, I said, what do you have that makes you so special that they would come to Ohio to find you. And he just had a bachelor's degree. And I'm thinking there are so many people in this community that have more than a bachelor's degree, that have more skills, more training, more education, and they got skipped over just to one in Ohio. That's not right. And so what I want to do is have a conversation with these companies, Lockheed, Boeing, BMW, to figure out how we can, for real, not talk about it, but how we can seriously hire people from this community so they too can pay cash for their houses. Because my got mortgage every month. I don't know, it's pretty high, right? And so I want to have real conversations though, and come up with real strategies and real solutions, and not just talk about political, performative conversations, but how we can really move the needle. And I know that you have to work across political lines and work with Republicans, like Will Timmons, who in this room may not like, right? We have a relationship. And so I know when I'm elected, I can call Timmons and say, hey, look, my district needs X, Y, and Z. Can we get some support or some help with that? That's the type of relationships and type of help you have to have when you're in a district where the majority of the people don't have a college education. Well, the kids are dropping out of school left and right because they can't wear their pants below their behinds, right? And so I just want to make sure that our district is no longer overlooked, as it has been for a very long time. We need more than just a politician to represent our district. We need a fighter. Somebody's going to stand up and speak truth to power. And sometimes, like my brothers in Tennessee are doing, sometimes you have to go on the floor and make a little noise to be heard and seen. And that's what I intend to do, is make sure that no person in 25 or anywhere in Greenville County, really, is unheard or unseen any longer.
Each candidate will have 3 minutes to answer the hot topic. Redistricting continues to shape representation and political power across South Carolina. What are your views on the current redistricting process, and what steps, if any, would you support to ensure district maps are fair, transparent, and reflective of the communities they represent?
So we'll just start with candidate Kendrick, and then we'll work our way back, if that's okay with you all.
I figured it was up for me to volunteer to go first this one time. I'll be real simple about it. I mean, these districts that we have are gerrymandered in such a way that South Carolina is not being represented the same way it looks. If you look at the various maps that are flying around, you know, there's 6-1 where we have one Democratic district, but we certainly don't have a 10% or 15% Democratic population in South Carolina. It's actually a lot. You wouldn't know that sometimes, but it's actually a little bit closer than you think. So I think we can just be simple about it. We need to get rid of all this gerrymandering. We need to look at populations. We need to look at how many people live where, and we need to place those people into districts that make sense, so that when you are participating in government, you are really participating in government. Because right now, what we are seeing going on is a con job. This is South Carolina politicians kowtowing to Washington, D.C. Can you imagine? We've been through a long, sordid history, but can you imagine the early founding fathers of our country seeing this going on and being proud of this thing they built? You know, they didn't think democracy would last longer than about a generation. And here we are, quarter millennia later. We still have it, but not for long if we don't stop doing these strange things where we are trying to take people out of play. I'll just be direct, because I think that's what you deserve from people that want to represent you. I saw somebody in the State House say, we should be careful redistricting. It might motivate black voters. Wait, what in the world are we talking about? Living in a country where we're upset that some different people might not vote. What if they go and vote? not the United States. So the first thing I think we need to do, and I don't know how complicated or simple it will be, but I don't really care. We need to get rid of all this gerrymandering. Everybody needs to be at the polls. We need to try to work towards having 100% citizens of South Carolina voting for the people that are going to represent them. We don't need to worry about which party that puts into power. We don't need to worry about what advantages that creates or gets rid of for certain institutions that have been entrenched in our government forever. We need to say, does everyone in this room, does everyone in this block, this city, this county, and this state, do they all have a voice? Do they all have a fair shot at being heard? If we don't do that, then we're going to lose this thing we've had for 250 years. So I'm ashamed of what I see going on down there. I'm ashamed of what I see in places like Tennessee and Louisiana. It is absolutely an attempt to break apart these United States, and we need to stop it as best we can and as fast as we can.
So what he said. Watching what has been going down in Columbia these last couple of weeks, it's so disheartening and demoralizing to hear the mindset behind some of the decisions that are being made. We are better than this. We should be better than this. And yet, people are saying things out loud that, A, should not be spoken out loud, but why are we still thinking this way? I do not understand it. I do know that the lines need to be fixed. We need to get away from the gerrymandering. What's happening right now, though, it's being sledgehammered through. There's insufficient input from the public. There's insufficient information going to the public. When the lines were redrawn back in 2020, 2021, in that time frame, there were numerous public hearings around the state getting input from the public, from the voters. This that is happening right now, they've had very short, I think 2 short public testimony opportunities, and that's it. Someone from off drew the map that they're looking at. Yeah, they were in DC. And that we cannot abdicate our power, our voting rights to someone who is coming in from not in our state, telling us where our lines need to be drawn, and we don't need to be doing it because we're bending the knee to someone who has zero interest in these United States. Yes, lines need to be redrawn, but it needs to be done in the correct process, at the correct time, after the census. I heard testimony the other day, a woman who I think is on county council in Hampton, and she said that they're divided into 4, and there's no way they can get a voice and representation when they are a small portion of a larger district, and it's only a portion of their county that is going to be heard, and not the other 3/4 of it. So yes, lines do need to be drawn, but we need to go about it in the right way. We need to look at it from the right perspective so that we are not trying to rig the representation, but we are trying to open the representation to everybody in our state.
Well, I was about to say I had the privilege of being down there this week. I don't know if it's a privilege. But the reality of it is this. What you see taking place is a whole bunch of people who are afraid that you finally realize that they've been doing a terrible job.
Thank you.
State because they've been in charge for the last 30 years.
Yeah.
So everything that we have to complain about this state, they got to own it. And they think you finally figured that out. And so what the Cali case in Louisiana did was gave them the green light to do what they've been wanting to do. I want you to hear this because they're trying to sell this to you in a way that's not very true. So let's just start really just telling the truth in every place. The case that was ruled, the Supreme Court case in Louisiana did not say for us to do this. They didn't tell us to do this. That case says this: if you do it, we won't try to stop you. And so that's all they needed. And so they've been busy receiving information from DC. Trump is on the phone just about every day and coaching them on how to make these changes happen.
With the truth out there, man.
And so listen, Shane Massey said, if you guys do this, you're going to mobilize the black vote. Let's give him what he asked for. Let's give him what he asked for. The black vote, the brown vote, the white vote, our allies vote. Because there's a lot of people, once again, here in the state, the majority of South Carolinians say leave it alone, but they're ignoring it. You said leave it alone when it came to reproductive health for women. They're ignoring it. You said leave it alone when it came to DEI. They ignored that. They do whatever they want to do because they have a super majority. That's where the problem lies. So the problem lies in this. We have to flip seats. Until we flip seats, even if this does not pass, I was telling somebody this morning, I say, because the Senate is trying to fight it a little bit right now. If this does not go through this time, they will try it again. They're going to try it again. So for the first time, every Republican on the House side has competition for the first time ever. And so if we don't break up this supermajority, they'll continue to force things down our throats. They'll continue to make us deal with stuff that does not improve your life. We're not talking about roads like we should. We're not talking about health care and mental health care. We're not talking about maternal health. We're not talking about the things that really matter to folks like we should. And so the only way to change that narrative is that we change who's in the seat. And so we have to be. So speaking to my community or the black community alone, we got about 1.2 to 1.4 million registered voters in the state. During the election, presidential election, only about 750,000 of us showed up. We left about 400,000 votes on the table. We could have changed every office in the state. And so it's really time to come up. Make sure all your cousins and play cousins and all your friends know this is not the election to wait out. We've got to show up this time and give them what they're asking for.
I think we all know that gerrymandering is just manufactured cheating. It's first used, I know Josh said that the founding fathers would be disappointed, but gerrymandering has been around since 1812. Started in Massachusetts by the governor of Massachusetts because his party was losing, like the Republicans are losing now. And they used it as a tool to change the system so that they can stay ahead. And we know that Trump has always been about cheating to stay ahead, always. And while we have been sleeping on Republicans, they've been strategizing. They've been figuring out how to get a one-up on us, and they got one. And so now what we've got to do is stop talking about how we get a one-up on them and actually do it. We've got to come up with our own strategy, because if not, we'll have this conversation tomorrow, and next week, and next year, and our kids' next lifetime, right? And so one of the things I'm going to say is that, I don't know if you all know this now, the state last week announced that the city of Greenville and Florence will now go to nonpartisan elections. Did y'all know that? So the city will now go to nonpartisan elections. So the next election, you won't be able to vote Democrat or Republican in the city of Greenville or in Florence. I don't know why they chose Florence and Greenville. I do know why they chose Florence and Greenville. So again, to cheat, right? Because they saw that Greenville is more Democratic than it's ever been, right? A lot of people moved from New Jersey and from New York who have more liberal thinking views. And they saw this happening and they said, wait a minute, we got to figure out a way to stop this. It's another form of gerrymandering. And it's happening right here in our city. And nobody's talking about it. And so while we are focused on what's happening in Columbia and in DC and in Louisiana and in Mississippi and all the other places, in Mississippi, they said, wait a minute. The same thing that Shane Massey said. They said, we are going to wake up black people. And black people, we gotta wake up. We gotta stop waiting on a crisis to happen for us to wake up. If you saw what happened in Georgia last week, there were 5 special elections. All Democrats won every single election. And these were Republican seats prior to. And so that's what's happening all around this nation, is that Democrats are winning in seats that they never won. They won Mar-a-Lago, Trump's own backyard. They won a seat in Texas that's never ever been a Democratic seat in a state house race. And so we can still do this, but we gotta do it collectively.
The next topic is healthcare and public health. Candidates will have 2 minutes to answer. How would you improve access to affordable healthcare and mental health services in South Carolina?
And because of time, we'll start with candidate calls and then we'll walk through.
I think one of the things we have to do, and this goes back to the schools, is making sure, because our kids have mental health issues, a lot of kids do. And I noticed some of the schools, and I'll see a council leave one school to go to another school. And when they leave that school, a kid is having a crisis and nobody's there. And so it becomes it turns from a medical issue into a police issue because only the police is now there now to handle that issue. And so when we talk about access to health care, we cannot forget about our kids who are struggling in the schools with mental health disorders. There are over 1 million people in South Carolina who don't have access to health insurance. And that means when they go to the doctor, leave the doctor, they get these enormous bills that they cannot afford. I remember about 6 years ago, I had a friend of mine, well, not a friend, but somebody I knew, white family. The mom was sick one night, went to the hospital, and she had a real bad headache. Went to the hospital at like 12 in the morning. They gave her Tylenol and sent her home. She died the same night from an aneurysm. They didn't see her because she didn't have health insurance. They turned her away, and she died from an aneurysm. And so making sure that those kind of things don't happen to any more families in South Carolina is a priority of mine. And it's always been something I've been passionate about ever since I learned that story about this kid and his mom. And so, so thank you.
Well, one of the first things that we need to do after we flip these seats is that we need to expand Medicaid. Absolutely, must expand Medicaid. Right now, anywhere from 300,000 to 400,000 people in South Carolina are going without insurance because our state decided in its wisdom to just ignore the opportunity to expand Medicaid. It was granted to us under Obamacare, and we should have done it. And the first thing we need to do when we change leadership is that we need to deal with that. Because we have not expanded Medicaid, our rural hospitals have suffered tremendously. And so we're facing closure after closure because those rural communities oftentimes are inhabited by people with lower incomes, and they are Medicaid recipients. And so if we're not providing the source of revenue, the hospitals will close. We could fix this in the next 12 months if we really wanted to. Well, according to redistricting, we might can fix it in 7 days if we really were committed to that. Also, we got to stop passing crazy legislation in terms of dealing with reproductive health and things of that sort, making it very difficult for us to retain good doctors or recruit good doctors. We keep branding ourselves as a way that this is not an attractive place for medical personnel to come. But those two things can be dealt with real quickly. And real briefly, when it comes to healthcare, I say this again, whatever's in your budget proves what matters to you. For years now, we've treated healthcare as if it's just an inconvenience. It is a serious issue that faces our veterans and quite other people. And so if we're really serious about it, it becomes a line item in the budget. And so we have to fight for that to become a recurring line item in the budget so folks can get the help that they need.
It's simple. Expand Medicaid. Destigmatize mental health issues. Fund treatment for mental health issues. And then looking at maternal health care and the maternal health care deserts in this state, that is a huge issue that is being created by the legislation that we've seen passed over the last couple of years in terms of maternal health care. And the strictures that have been placed on women, and the legislation, the proposed legislation that is absolutely ridiculous that keeps coming out, those are the things that are affecting our maternal health care in this state. It is why obstetrics, obstetricians, and gynecologists are leaving the state because they are afraid of the repercussions of these laws that have been passed,
as well as the commentary that continues to come up about things that they want to do. An ombudsman to I don't even know what they're going to do, except control women and the choices that they make, and the reproductive choices that they make, whether that is miscarriage care, abortion, birth control, IVF, anything that can affect women's health that they are attempting to control legislatively, that is driving doctors out of our state, and that is creating a crisis for the women in this state. So addressing those issues in addition to the mental health care and the Medicaid are crucial to shoring up health care across the state, not just for women, but for everyone.
So I agree with what everyone else has said, but I'm going to add a piece about mental health, which is really important to me based on some work I've been doing. So the Freedom Caucus and some of the Republicans found out a few weeks ago that I represent a fellow in Charlotte who killed someone. It's been a very high-profile case. The president likes to talk about it. It's very controversial. What they don't know, and what most people don't know, is that this man has gone to mental health facilities. He had gone to the hospital. He had gone to the emergency room over and over and over again. He had actually gone to the emergency room 8 times in the 6 days before that murder occurred, and there was no one to help him, not because they couldn't or because they didn't want to, but because there's no system to help him. I have a client, Randall, right now who is having a psychotic break. He's an undiagnosed schizophrenic. His mother called the EMT, but the police also show up. Everybody there is trying to help him. Everybody there is trying to figure out a solution. One officer decides to arrest him. Because of that, EMT can't take him anymore. So now I represent him, and I don't have anywhere to go for him. There isn't a system in place for me to help this young man who is sick. He didn't make a decision to have this problem. He didn't do something to himself to have this problem. It is the way he was born. It is the way that he was created. It's not his fault. He doesn't have anywhere to go for help. So if we don't address that system, there's nothing to improve. We have to create it. But it is created in other places. There are places where police understand that they can take someone to a facility for treatment and evaluation so we can keep that person safe and we can keep the public safe. And until we do that, we're going to keep seeing these tragic events, and we're going to do things like, well, let's make sure we can put a firing squad in place to get rid of the people who committed the crimes. But no one's ever going to think about how we stop it before it starts. And if we could get this mental health system in place, that would be a real progress.
The next topic is infrastructure and public safety. Candidates have 2 minutes to answer. What strategies do you support to improve public health while strengthening trust between communities and law enforcement?
Okay, so
But if you want to start us off,
you are welcome.
I'll start with public safety because it's, like I said, it's not a secret. I'm a criminal defense lawyer, so I've been representing people accused of crimes. And I also take cases against the police department when there is misconduct. And if you look at what the legislature is doing right now, we are passing more and more draconian laws to address these problems like drugs and violent crimes. And we've been doing that for half a century. We've been increasing the penalties for drug crimes with absolutely no effect on addiction rates, no effect on crime. And it's because all we care about is going back to what we talked about at the beginning. What gets you reelected? Standing up in front of those people and saying, I'm going to try to figure out how to make the world a little better and solve some of the problems that lead to crime. And maybe that'll lower the crime rates. That's not going to whip up the pace. That's not going to create excitement and anxiety amongst people. What it does is saying we're going to put people in jail for longer and longer and longer and longer and longer, even though we know it doesn't work. So the number one thing we have to do is identify the factors that lead to people ending up in the criminal justice system, and then we need to figure out how we can intervene at the right time and help them never get there. Because if you do that, you have a real effect on crime. It has been proven time and time again. In South Carolina, there are prosecutors in other places that are shocked when I tell them the small amount of drugs that will put you in prison for 25 years. These are not drug dealers. These are mules. These are people being taken advantage of. These are people that are hopeless. And they're going to jail for what is essentially forever. And that's not affecting any crime problem here. What we need to do is figure out how do we stop that at the beginning. And that is how we create public safety. We don't take people off the board. We don't ruin their lives. We stop them before we ever get there. And it can be done. It's done in other places.
From a public safety perspective, one of the things I'm most passionate about is the issue of guns and gun safety. My older daughter got involved with this right after Parkland. She was in high school at the time. She was the age of some of the children who were killed at Parkland. And she became passionate about it. What she didn't realize is that years earlier, when she and her sister were 5 and 6 years old, I became passionate about it with Sandy Hook. And as we have looked at gun legislation since then, or the lack of gun legislation since then in South Carolina, it is something that enrages me. We had, in June, it will be 11 years since Mother Emanuel. The Charleston loophole still hasn't closed. The legislature, the Republican-led legislature, has let down one of their own in not doing that. There is legislation that is sitting in committee that is simple legislation on gun safety storage, or safe gun storage rather, sitting in committee. That is something that even Republicans across the state support. And yet, in our legislature, with our supermajority who is protecting their jobs, it sat in committee and it died. It is time, first of all, to get rid of the supermajority, but for the safety in our schools, for the safety of our children, for the safety as we walk down the street, to start looking at the legislation that could be put in place that hasn't. And it is legislation that can save lives. And I'm not talking about it just from a criminal standpoint, but from a mental health standpoint as well. When you are looking at people suffering from mental illness, who have access to guns, who shouldn't have.
Thank you. So right now, when it comes to public safety, one of the things that is predominant in the news right now is youth violence. And so we have to address that. And when I think about it, I think about two things. I think about activities and opportunities. Here's what I mean by this. This so that we can do more preventative things, because one of the things that we have to create in this community, particularly in my district, is that law enforcement sees itself as part of the community and not against the community. It's not them versus us. And one of the ways that we can do that is get more community patrol and also more involvement in those activities and opportunities. And what I mean by that, when it comes with activities, the younger the child is, the more he or she needs to have activities. There needs to be some things that occupy their time. They need to have some stuff that they fall in love with. They need to fall in love with football and baseball and music and things of that sort. And we used to have more of that, and a lot of that's been defunded. We've got to go back and making sure that we know that's an essential part of our community. But also in terms of the older children, there needs to be more opportunity. Keep talking about how they can be plugged into this economy and plugged into the society. We need to give them opportunities to make a good living so they don't move in the other direction. Those are things that we can do on the grassroots level. Those are things that we can support through funding, through policy, and we must, because you are absolutely right. The bills that are being pitched right now are going back to the 90s in terms of trying to lock as many people away as they possibly can. We have to stop that before it gets out of control. Thank you.
Well, about a week ago, I went into the jail in Greenville, and I learned that we're overpopulated, and have been overpopulated for about 3 years now. and they have 600 more people in the jail than the jail can hold. That means people are sleeping on floors, they're sleeping on cots, not floors, they're sleeping on cots, sleeping on top of each other. And so a dorm that was made with 2 people is sleeping 4 people, right? And so you talk about public safety, you talk about who's actually out on the streets in terms of law enforcement that's locking people up. I made a post last night, and every single member of the sheriff's office in Greenville on command staff of 13 people, only 1 is black. And the black one was never put the sheriff out there. And I made the post because I've talked to several different officers who have retired and some still working there who have an issue with that. And if you look at the entire agency, over 750 people, only 1 African American. And I'm not saying that we should hire people based on race. I'm not saying that. But you can't tell me that there are not qualified people in the agency who cannot be promoted. I know one that all of us in this room know, who's a lieutenant, who was up for a promotion to be a captain. And she didn't make captain because she didn't go back on the road. They told her she had to go back on the road and patrol the streets to be a captain. And she said, no, I'm not going back on the streets. And so they passed over her and then promoted her white counterpart who kept his office job. And so when you talk about public safety, you also have to talk about fairness in these systems and addressing these issues. And it's not going to make confrontational. What I want to know, if my taxpayer dollars are paying your salary, then why can't we have a conversation about equity in the agency? And so I have a meeting coming up with the sheriff's office, and I plan to report out what that meeting looks like and what it said in that meeting. Because again, you talk about the number of people that are in these jails and the people that are locking these people up. You got to look at who's making the arrest.
This will be our last question. Candidates will have 1 minute. What do you want voters to remember most about your candidacy? And how can constituents hold you accountable after the election?
And what we will do is I think we can start with the 2 candidates on the end. So I'm going to say our lead candidates first, and then we'll work our way back.
I think the most important thing for people to remember about my candidacy is that I am passionate about listening to the people I serve. I grew up in a Republican household, so I understand viewpoints from that side of the aisle, but at the same time, I understand how to talk to them and hear them and persuade them, I hope. But I also want to make sure that everyone I serve, even those Republicans I disagree with, know they have someone who is at least validating their concerns and hearing what they have to say. Because to me, one of the most important things listening does is shows to the other person that you value them, that you give them the dignity they deserve as a human being. And that is what I want people to understand about my leadership, is that I will listen to you, regardless of whether or not we disagree.
What I want folks to remember about me and to believe about me is that he really does care. He really does care. This is not something that I need to pad my resume. This is not something I need to create some type of leverage for me to launch me into something else in life. I did this because I saw problems that I couldn't unsee. But I also saw problems that I felt like I had the skill set to change and to do something about it. I also realized I got the relationships intact. I don't have to build any bridges I burned, all that good stuff. I got people that believe in me, that want to see us do well. And we're building even more relationships because we're going to need that for District 25 to thrive. I just want to know when it's all said and done that folks say he did his best to make this district better and he left this district better.
I want people to know that I am me. I've always been who I am. And what I mean by that is what you see is what you get from me, right? I show up as my authentic self everywhere I am. I don't turn off my light for anybody. I don't dim my light for anybody. I help anybody and everybody I can help, whether you live in 25 or 26, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. I'm always showing up for people. And people know that. I get phone calls, Facebook messages, texts every single day from somebody about issues, whether it's law enforcement, whether it's a school issue, because people know I care about them. They know I care about this community. They know that I will go the extra mile to make sure they have what they need. And so I want people to continue knowing that about me, right? I want people to know that I'll continue to show up. You know, I ran for office twice, and I didn't win either time. And I stayed in the community. I didn't move away. I didn't run away. I didn't hide my face. I stayed consistent because I know people in this community need help.
Thanks. I don't want to be in politics, and I don't want to be a politician. I want to be in government, and I want to be a representative. And I want people to have a voice. I want people to feel like there is someone listening to them, and I want to feel like they are part of this democracy that has been going on for so long. The way you will hold me accountable is by calling me. I don't mean to sound overconfident, but I have an 803 cell phone number because I got it 25 years ago, so I had to get a new phone number. And I bought 864 house 22. And the reason I got that number is so that you won't have to try to remember how to get in touch with me. And I don't care if you live in District 22, because if you live in South Carolina, you still get to call and yell at me. You might maybe call me and tell me I did a good job every once in a while, but I want to hear your complaints. I want to hear what's not happening, and I want you to ask me why it's not. And that's how you will hold me accountable, because I will be listening to you. Because representation means that I'm not the important part of this process. You are.
Thank you to each of our candidates for showing up. It is very imperative for us to be informed, for us to inform others, and we don't take it lightly that you actually came. So thank you. Thank you to Ms. Askew for me, for allowing myself and Ariana to host and moderate such a prestigious event. We do not take it lightly. And at this time, we will turn it back into Sarah Askew's hands.
Our candidates and our moderators are here. You all we have one candidate who's unable to be with us today. We have a representative from the Dexter Reeves campaign. Ms. Amber Drummond.
Thank you, Val. And thank you to everyone who took the time to came out and everyone who is on the panel. My name is Amber Drummond. I am the campaign manager for Dexter Reeves, who is running for House District 21. That is a seat, if you remember in December, it had a special election and 630 people came out to write his name correctly on the ballot for it to be counted in that election. And that is unprecedented for a write-in candidate. But it also speaks to the temperature in House District 21, that people there are ready for a change and that they believe in Dexter Reeves. And Dexter Reeves stands on some of the things that has already been mentioned. When you talk about public safety and expanding healthcare, Dexter Reeves has a background in public safety, having been a police officer, a law enforcement officer, for Greenville County and also for Greer City. He believes in public safety. He knows the role that it plays in the community and how vital it is, but he also knows how decisions made in Columbia has made it harder for law enforcement to do their job. And one of the main things is the unwillingness to expand Medicaid in South Carolina. We are paying for services that we do not even receive. And that is putting pressure on law enforcement officers, because those funds could go to fund mental health care, to help people who lost everything in 2008, built it back up only to lose it again in a pandemic. They're not dealing with, some of them rather, are not dealing with things that you might consider to be a real issue. They're dealing with trying to put life back together and falling into things that they otherwise wouldn't have fallen into, and we're criminalizing those things instead of giving them the help that they need. And also when you talk about not expanding health care, rural hospitals closing, those people have to go somewhere, and it puts a strain on our hospital systems, because there are no hospital systems or no services in local counties, neighboring counties, and neighboring cities that can actually supply those things. So those are some of the things that Dexter Reeves wants to run on. He also wants to run on infrastructure. My goodness, it's just hard to get around Greenville because, to keep your
tires. It's hard. It is incredibly hard, and Greer is one of those areas that is experiencing massive growth, and with massive growth comes a lot of wear and tear on the roads, and not enough money is being spent to repair those roads, even for the growth, or to repair those roads in response to the growth. So he definitely wants to help out with those issues. And teachers. I'm gonna just put it right there, put a period right there. Teachers. We need teachers, but teachers need us, and they need funding to properly do their jobs. And to do their jobs well, and to do their jobs without having to worry about doing the job of someone else as well. So Dexter Reeves appreciates your support. He is so sorry that he could not be here. He and I worked to try to find an alternative, but he ended up needing to be a driver for his family for them to go out of town. But he does appreciate your support, regrets that he could not be here, and he looks for your support to vote for him in November. He does not have a primary candidate, so he will not be on the ballot in June, but come November, you can actually see his name on the ballot and press his name. And flip House District 21, because it has not had a Democratic challenger, and I can't tell you how long, but it has one this year, and not just a Democratic challenger, a qualified Democratic challenger.
Thank you, Amber. We're gonna put Amber on the ballot. To all of you, thank you, thank you, thank you. It is not lost on us that this is a holiday weekend, but thank you for taking time out of your schedule to share with us today. If you do not know who your candidates are, we have some ladies at the back. We can pull your sample ballot and print that out for you. If you do not know whether your registration is valid, you need to check it. You need to check it so that you'll be ready for Tuesday. You don't have to wait until June 9th. The polls open Tuesday, May 26th, and we need to be there Tuesday. You don't have to wait till June. Go on Tuesday. Tuesday. Tuesday, May 26th. May 26th. I'm gonna pick a phone today. The next time you talk to Brother Timmons, the last time I was in his office, for those of you who don't know, Just Days at the Nation's Capital is an annual event. And I had a nice little meeting with the young lady in his office. She didn't know what a food desert was. I was horrified. We had to explain to her what a food desert was. And for those of us who we may not live in a food desert, but we at least know what it is. I'm gonna need you to have a little word prayer or whatever. Other than that, we are thankful. If you weren't here and you missed it, or for our folks who are on Facebook Live, if you get back home and you want to go back and see what Josh said and what Caroline said, it is on Facebook Live. You'll be able to go back and look at that. If nothing else, let us again thank our chapter president, Tommy Gaddy, our chapter second vice president, Ms. Ebony Martez. Thank you for your support, your leadership, and guiding us. Rhonda Hunt, our first vice president, is out of town this weekend. We want to make sure she keeps the job that pays her. She's out of town. But thank you all. And again, to our moderators, come out the corner. Educator. Thank you all for joining us. We've got a quick task to get these chairs and tables put back up, but thank you all for joining us, and look for more to come from us as we head toward the ballot for November.